Welcome to It's All About the Questions, where learning to ask the right questions can help you achieve lifelong success. Now, here to help you ask all the right questions is award-winning author, international speaker, and business strategist, Laura Stewart.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. We are back on the air with It's All About the Questions, which is me. This is my favorite time of the week, as you know. I'm really excited to be here, and my guest is already laughing, and that's the tone of the show for the entire hour. I get to talk to the one person in the world that no matter what mood I'm in, if I get an email from him, it completely shifts me. Just reading his words completely change my state of being. And today we're going to be talking about what happens when a cellist and a sniper get together. In my view, life-altering magic. And I'm going to do another Harry Potter comparison in just a moment. But I want to welcome John David Mann to the show. John, welcome back.
Good morning, Laura. Thank you so much for having me here.
It's, I've already said it. It's such a joy to have you back on the show. And you and Brandon Webb have a new book out. And I interviewed Brandon last week. And today's launch day, isn't it, for the book?
Today's the day. Yep.
Okay.
On the shelves.
So the book is Total Focus, How to Make Better Decisions Under Pressure. Or, as you like to sometimes call it, 7 Deadly Habits of Highly Successful People.
Yes. Highly deadly entrepreneurs. Exactly.
Highly deadly entrepreneurs, exactly. And that's in a good way, how focused and everything that they are. Now, you are a professionally trained cellist. You come from a family of classical musicians and teachers. Brandon's a Navy SEAL sniper. He trained snipers to be snipers. You guys are like from 2 different planets.
I'll say. My father fought in World War II. He was actually raised in Germany. He escaped Germany during the war, got here, naturalized, got drafted in the U.S. Army, shipped back to Germany as a counterintelligence agent. And in Germany, he had to go behind enemy lines. And so he quietly gave away all his ammunition to local citizens so that his guns would be lighter because he couldn't stand the idea of actually firing a gun. That's my military background.
Yet, when you're writing this book, and this one happens to be a business-focused book using the principles that Brandon learned in the SEALs and all the work that he did running what's now valued at $100 million company. You yourself are an amazing entrepreneur, multiple businesses. You started your own school when you were just a kid.
Yes.
But,
Guilty.
The last book you guys wrote was called The Killing School. And that one blew my mind. But I just want to read this. So this is the opening lines of Total Focus. Staring through my scope at the man in my crosshairs, I take a slow breath. An Afghan farmer with a rifle slung casually over his shoulder. A farmer who looks a lot like someone trying not to look like someone who's up to something he shouldn't be. I feel the pressure of my finger against the metal trigger. Feel that pressure slowly increase. How do you write that, never having been in war? I mean, you are a co-writer on some of the books that I consider the must-own books in the world. How do you do that?
Yeah, I have never acted in front of a camera. I've never been in, movies or TV. But I suspect it's a lot like that. To write Brandon's memoir, The Red Circle, our first book, which is really his whole life story, and the second book, Among Heroes, it's another memoir of heroes he's known. The Killing School, as you mentioned, which got some of the most gritty, pulse-pounding action situations that I've certainly ever written, some that I've ever even read, really. And I've never been in this situation. It's like, here's the thing. We're all human beings. My fundamental starting place is we're all human beings. We all fundamentally have the same experience, even though the trappings and the circumstance may be radically different. There's a way to kind of snake the roots underground and reach that other tree on the far field, even if it looks totally different. And I think it's, in a word, empathy. It's, a writer's skill is the same as an actor's skill, which weirdly enough, as one guy in the killing school said, is the sniper's skill of empathy, because the sniper, first and foremost, is an intelligence asset whose job is to reconnoiter, to observe, and to see what nobody else sees and understand it. That was a long answer.
No, that was a great answer, which leads me to all these different thought processes that I have. You know that I called Brandon Harry Potter on
yeah, I love it.
on my interview with the Killing School, because Harry Potter is essentially a sniper. We don't look at it that way, but he does, because of what you just said. It's all that intelligence gathering. It's all of those other pieces. The last thing is that moment when you pull the trigger, or in Harry Potter's case, use the wand to save people. I don't know. You've probably not thought of this, but I consider you Albus Dumbledore, the head of Hogwarts. And here's why. I don't know if you know this little fact. The author of this book, J.K. Rowling, she chose the name Dumbledore because of Dumbledore's love of music. She imagined him walking around humming to himself a lot. And he's like a bumblebee, because the word Dumbledore comes from early modern English word for bumblebee.
Oh, fantastic.
Right? So you're the word meister, right? But bumblebees fertilize things. They get pieces from here and there, and then they pull it all together. They make amazing honey, right? They work as a team, and they create, because of that, flowers that grow and make the world a better place. So you're Albus Dumbledore to Brandon's Harry Potter.
I love it. I'll call that bet and raise you 5. You know, Mary Kay used to say the bumblebee flies because it doesn't realize that it's impossible, that it can't do it according to the laws of physics. That's pretty much a description of my career.
I would agree with that.
I'll take Dumbledore. The Dumbledore is fine. Yeah. You know, it's funny. You would think, going back to your first question, you know, so cellist, classical music, sniper, military, daredevil. Brandon is a physical daredevil, not as much as some of his friends who are no longer with us for that reason, but he is a physical phenomenon. He's a font of energy. He is incredibly on the go. He has more energy than anybody I've ever known. I am not a physical daredevil, and we're in many ways opposites, and certainly our background is opposites. But when we first met, and it was an electric moment in my life and in my career, we had an instant bond. I mean, we just clicked. The classic click. that was us, and we're working on our 5th book now together. So.
Total Focus is the 5th book you guys did together, or is there another one coming up?
Focus is 4th. We're working on number 5 as we speak.
Okay, great. I know I've read all the other ones.
Yep.
All right, so you're sitting down to write a book like this. You have to get involved in the world, so to speak, yet stay outside the world of the person that you're writing for. And you don't just write one book at a time. You've got other projects going with other people. How do you get yourself, now the title of this book is Total Focus, right? How do you help yourself get that total focus? You know,
I sort of have 2 answers to that, but the first is, you know, writing, it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out how I operate. And if you read interviews with writers, it's one of the things that fascinates me about doing that is how diverse they are in terms of their routines, what works for them. Some writers have to be alone in a quiet room. Some writers have to be surrounded by music. There are writers who have said that they can only write if they're sitting in a busy coffee shop with noise all around them. There are writers who have to write first thing in the morning, writers who have to write last thing at night. There are writers who outline, who can't live without an outline. Writers who could never abide an outline, who start from the first word and then just go from there. John Irving, the novelist, starts with the last sentence of the book and kind of works his story backwards from there. I mean, it's almost bizarre. It's like a menagerie, a zoo. So it took me years to figure out how I operate. And I think that is something that's applicable to people in any field. figuring out how you operate. Because for those years when I didn't really know how I operate, I would kind of beat myself up because I would be struggling. I would be trying to figure out how to start, and I would be saying, "Oh, you have no idea what to do, and I don't know how to get into this book, and this is beyond me, and I can't." Lack of understanding of how I operate, that vacuum would be filled by, self-recrimination and self-castigation and self-doubts and all of that. So it's taken me a while to figure out, how I work, which is to sit down in a chair with a pad of blank paper, cup of hot tea, and a pen, and a ton of research behind me. I've interviewed Brandon for a dozen phone calls, or I've transcribed speeches, or in the case of other writers like Bob Berg, I've read his blog posts, I've read his other books. Whatever I can do to just gather background. It may not be the content of what we're going to write, but it's background. It's kind of, I get to steep myself in who that person is. I guess like what an actor might do to prepare to play a character. And then I'll just sit down and relax and have no thought in my head and say, okay, let's just see where it goes. For me, the total focus is kind of weird, comes from sort of a total non-focus. I have to just sit down and not try to write a book. That's how it starts. But the other answer I wanted to give is the first principle in the book. The book is based on 7 principles, and number 1 is front sight focus. It's this thing of a sniper being completely focused on what's in that little circle through their scope, and like nothing else in the world exists. Their entire being, breath, and muscle energy is all focused on that little circle. And in business, that translates into understanding what's primary, what's pivotal, what's essential, what's important right now, and forgetting everything else. So chapter 2, the second principle, is the opposite. It's total situational awareness, which means being aware of everything else. It's this weird paradox, this contradiction.
And that contradiction is the perfect way to go into the commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with John David Mann, author of Total Focus, How to Make Better Decisions Under Pressure. John, you were talking about the first 2 principles in Total Focus, front sight focus with total situational awareness, and how they seem to be on such opposite ends of the spectrum. When Brandon and I spoke last week, that really hit me, along with the third principle, which I just love it, embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Because it's so right there in your face. When you're writing, how do you apply those first 3 principles?
The third is the easiest, so I'll save it for last. Embrace the suck. The first 2 are really curious. I mean, it's actually it's one of the things that, of course, for this book, part of my job is to take his experience and translate that to the page, which also means taking his experience and kind of synthesizing it into the form and structure of a book. So part of that job is to come up with these, 7 principles. It wasn't like Brandon said, hey, let's sit down and talk about these 7 principles. You have to extract that. I imagine that someone did the same thing with Stephen Covey way back when. So I part of maybe the most fun I had with this book was extracting and formulating these 7 principles. And I love the first 2 because they're contradictory and because that's the nature of a highly skilled professional in any profession. So with a sniper, it's like, yes, you focus completely on what you're looking at through the scope. You're not necessarily going to shoot it. Most of the time, looking through the scope is just reconnaissance. So what you're really doing is intelligence gathering. Totally focused, but there's some part of you, some part of the back of your brain is on at least Amber Alert, is highly attuned to everything else going on all in your periphery. I think that may be the single defining trait. There are others, but this is probably the single top defining trait for me that distinguishes a special operations warrior from just the average person walking around the street. You walk down the street, it's amazing how unaware people are of what's going on around them. They're looking at their iPhones, or just staring at the sky, they're thinking their thoughts. And if a crime suddenly broke out, or a terrorist event suddenly broke out, or somebody suddenly got hit by a bike or a car or whatever, people are so slow to react because they're not situationally aware. And we talk about that a good deal in the book. In business, that's critical. Because, yes, you have to be completely focused on, like, who is your customer? What is your product? What is your objective? What is your mission? You know, the mission-critical particulars of what you're doing in your business. I haven't got to writing yet, I know. At the same time, if you're in business and you think, well, I don't need to, if you're in the transportation business and you think, well, I don't need to worry about what's going on in the media, or I don't need to worry about what's going on in packaging or in IT or whatever, you're kidding yourself. Because sooner or later, completely unrelated businesses are suddenly going to cross your path, possibly in a critical way. You know, that's why Blockbuster got taken over by Netflix. That's why it was Amazon who created the online bookstore, not the existing publishers or bookstores. That's why it's always some upstart from outside an established industry who comes in and dominates, just exactly as Brandon's doing right now with his media company, because they're situationally aware. And so that was, for me, actually, that was my favorite lesson in the book, if I had to pick one out of the 7.
Well, I can give you a real life, right from today, example of that front sight focus and total situational awareness. I was having a bad morning this morning, and I had to get to the radio station, and I get my mom out to the car. I pull the car out of the garage, and I go to get out of the car so I can take care of her walker and get her all situated. So I'm focused, right? I am front sight focus on, I'm interviewing John today. Here's where my world, my head needs to be. But I also needed to be totally situationally aware of my mom and all the other pieces. Well, as I'm getting out of the car, I do what I normally do, which is kind of do a scope of the yard peripherally, right? My peripheral vision is kind of looking at it, and I noticed something strange on my driveway. And I'm like, what is that? And it made me stop. And I'm like, do I need to look at this? And I went, yeah, I kind of do. It was a $20 folded up bill. I had blown into my yard. In that particular case, it was perfect. It shifted my mood completely. And I got Mom into the car, and then we went off to the show, and here we are. But because I opened my focus a little bit from that moment and said, okay, I need to be aware of everything else around me, I got all this abundance. It didn't shift my main focus, which was get to the radio station, but it was worth being aware of, right?
Well, and sometimes your focus actually needs to get pulled out, get shifted, because sometimes your focus it turns out it's wrong. I mean, in 2004, I was completely focused on my career, which was I was going to be a Hollywood screenwriter. That's what I was doing. I'd been preparing for it for years. I had read the books, I'd been out there and visited, I'd gone to conferences, I'd written some screenplays. That was my career plan. Bob Berg ruined my career. And there was this guy that I knew who said, hey, I'd like you to write this book with me. And it was like a distraction. It was an annoyance. It's like, man, I don't even have time to even think about that. But I'm glad that I did and took a look at it, because that gave me an entirely new career. That book became The Go-Giver, and that's how I got where I am. The same thing happened with Brandon. I mean, my agent called me one day and said, I've got this book idea from this guy. I don't think you do this, military books, but I just thought I should give you a call. And I instantly said, oh my God, yes, I'm doing it. I don't want to do it. I have to do it. And if I had been focused on what I was doing in my career to the exclusion of what unlikely gifts the universe might bring my way, then I wouldn't be in as good a place as I am.
So it was a happy accident, but not really, because you built yourself to that. I mean, you were an editor at a major publishing house. I mean, it wasn't like you had no experience in this world. You helped people make their books better for years. Right. And your love of words was always there. It's just implemented differently. And you've had a really interesting kind of bringing it all back together that you guys talk about in this book. And you've mentioned on your blog. By the way, John's blog is johndavidmann, MANN.com. Highly recommend you subscribe to it. About an incident with Mark Harmon. And you may end up getting involved with TV and screenwriting.
Yeah. Hey, from your lips to God's ears, right?
Yeah, I mean...
I love that idea.
And Brandon talked about his meeting with Mark Harmon last week on the show as well. But so what I'm hearing is it can come full circle, but you have to be present in the moment and do some sort of evaluation, correct? And you do that when you're writing, when you're planning things out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also that sometimes, and part of that I think is that sometimes the most critical opportunities, or even just most critical pieces of information, most critical clues, are going to come at you from the side, are not going to come at you from where you expect or intend to get them. And that's difficult. That's challenging because it means you kind of have to hold two opposite things in your hands at the same time. Going back to being a writer, I'll sit down with a plan, and I do outline. I'm an outline guy, so I guess I'll sit with that blank pad of paper. Once I get some initial impulses and ideas and sparks and shoots, I'll go and start, shaping an outline. But it's the balance between having an outline, which is like a plan, following it, but at the same time being open to suddenly discovering that you have to throw it out. That the story is shaping itself. It's emerging in a way that completely violates the outline and goes in a different direction. And you have to gauge whether it's kind of like, am I going to swing my rifle suddenly over to the left? Or am I going to ignore what's buzzing at me on the left and keep it pointed out front?
And you know what we're going to do with that? We're going to go into the national news break. That is so perfect. So keep your eye on the ball, everybody. Tweet out your favorite quote so far from today's show. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us live on the air and you're driving your car or in your house somewhere or listening, or you've got your phone on iHeartRadio, we are here with John David Mann, one of my favorite authors. He's the co-author of The Go-Giver with Bob Berg, The Red Circle with Brandon Webb, The Slight Edge with Jeff Olson. The list goes on and on and on and on. Take the Lead with Betsy Myers. And his current book, Total Focus, How to Make Better Decisions Under Pressure. And then The Killing School, which, I talked about that about a month or so ago. John, when you're writing a book like this, do you think about the impact your words are going to have on people going forward and how it changes their lives by reading the words?
I don't think about it when I'm writing the words. I mean, at the moment, what I'm in when I'm writing the words is the impact it's having on me. The person people always say, you have to know who you're writing for. Well, I'm writing for me, really. It's like, because I'm reading this as I go. And if I'm working on a passage and I find tears in my eyes, then that's how it moved me. If it gets me excited, if I can't sit down, if I have to stand up because I'm so electrified at some scene, that's how it's hitting me. When I step away from it, then, I'm very aware, or I'm trying to be very aware of how it's going to land for other people, because, when I got into writing, and as I got into it, what drew me here, as you alluded to earlier, is my love of words. I mean, I love words, individual words, even the letters. And of course, I love how they go together and what they do, what you can do with them. I think words are just the most magnificent human invention. So that's kind of what drew me here. And as you point out, I started out as a classical musician. I mean, to me, writing is music, and I have a very I was a composer. That's what was my first career. And so I look at a book as a composition. It has an arc. It has a form to it. All of that's what drew me here. But what feeds me and what keeps me here and what charges me up is the impact on other people. You just said a few things to me today about the impact this book has had on you and The Killing School as well. And even a blog post I wrote, some years back. That's what I do it for. I mean, I know of no feeling more exciting and more fulfilling than hearing someone say, hey man, you put these words in a sentence and it had an impact on my life. It changed my life, even in some small way. I love that.
When I read The Go-Giver for the first time, because I've read it many times and given it away, and all of the other books in the Go-Giver series, I read it and I went, oh my God, somebody put into the words exactly how I've always felt and believed. But
that's great.
But you put it in words, you and Bob, that was like, oh my gosh, they get me.
I love it.
I'm not a weirdo out there. They get me.
Well, it's funny. I hear that sentiment a lot more than the opposite. Where someone comes and say, wow, I never would have thought of this before. This is a totally unique thing. It really shifted my thinking. I don't get that a lot. It's more like what you just said. That put into words kind of what I always thought. And that's really satisfying because it's like, let's face it, there's no new ideas in the universe. Everything that could be thought has been thought in one form or another. So it isn't like coming up with a radical, revolutionary new thought, but maybe a new way of expressing something with a twist to it or a counterintuitive shape to it that makes you go, huh, so that is true. Okay, right. Yeah, I love that.
I met Les Brown the same day I met you, and Les said something at Bob's big event, and he said that two voices can say the exact same thing, but at one point you're ready to hear that person's voice over the other person's voice. You could have heard those same things from 10 different people, but that one other person may have said it slightly different in a way that you're ready to hear, and that's what helps transform. And
yes,
that's the beauty for me of the two books that you guys have just written together, Total Focus, How to Make Better Decisions Under Pressure, and The Killing School. It's not that I didn't know about front sight focus and total situational awareness and embrace the suck. I was ready to hear it, and I was ready to hear it in the way you wrote it, which is and you probably heard my cell phone, I had forgotten to mute, playing the Cantina song from Star Wars. Yes, it's my ringtone. I'm a geek. Okay, how do I put this? When you were putting together the words for the principles, how did you, or did you even just say, whatever it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be? Those words didn't come together by accident.
You mean the 7 principles themselves? Or you mean all the words in the book?
Well, I guess all the words in the book, but your process is such that the way you put those words together is uniquely you, but uniquely the other person.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting thing. So there are two different kinds of books that I do. There's a book in which two of us collaborate on creating sort of a third thing. Or let me back off. Say it differently. There's books in which I'm doing somebody else's story. So really, it's like playing a role in a film. Like I'm going to be, I'm going to go play Gandhi in this film. Then there's books in which my co-author and I will collaborate and conspire to create something which is an altogether third thing. Like The Go-Giver isn't Bob's voice or my voice; it's some other thing. But this, the Brandon books, because they're all told sort of in first person in Brandon's voice, they're me stepping into Brandon's skin and being Brandon, but there's almost a bunch of me in there too. And that couldn't happen if I didn't fundamentally really click with him, if I didn't really like him and get along with him, if we weren't good. Keep in mind, we're not only co-authors, but business partners, because this is really every book is a business. And it isn't just a business for the few months you write it, it's a business for years. So we are lockstep business partners, make no mistake. And what you're describing, sort of the fluidity of the words and how that all comes together, it's me writing Brandon. I couldn't work if we weren't a partnership, if we weren't, clicked. And there have been a lot of books that I started or were entertaining the idea of doing that I ended up not doing because I didn't have that click. It's got to be there.
You say that you're in business together. Now,
yes.
How to define how that business relationship works? I know about the clicking. There's a lot of authors that listen to my show, a lot of business people from the C-suite down to entrepreneurs just starting their businesses. When you're entering into a business relationship like this, how do you define that? Or don't you?
So, yeah, no, I really do. And so it's like this, and it may not be this way for other writers. The first thing is, for me, every book is two things. It's a book, that is, it's a window through which I hope to pour some words and touch some people's lives. And that's a form of creative expression. I've published over 24 books in the last decade plus, and in my view, every one of them is a blazing success as a book in terms of reaching people, having its readers come back and say, wow, that really... Every book is also a business, though. It's also a business, and of the 24 plus books I've written, most of them have been failures as businesses, honestly. Very few, or a handful, have been real successes as a business. It is as if you were a great cook and your friend said you should start a restaurant. And so you open the restaurant and your friends love it and the food is great, you get good reviews, and 2 years later it closes. You're a great cook, but it wasn't a success as a business. So for a book to be a success as a business, it has to return its investment and keep paying you after it's out. It has to be that successful. So the way I work as a co-author, in some cases ghostwriter, or partner writer, or whatever term you want to use, is I just go 50-50. We split it down the middle. It's a 50-50 partnership. We are co-founders of a little business. In most cases, we take on a partner, an investor, whom we call a publisher. And the publisher invests some money and some production and some promotion, but it's our business, and it has to pay back the publisher's investment, and then it has to pay us. And so how we operate typically is I write the book, the other guy markets the book. It's certainly true with Brandon and me, with Bob Berg and me, but it's a fuzzy line because I also promote, and they also, of course, participate very much in the writing. Brandon's an excellent writer, as is Bob Berg. So it isn't like I write in total isolation without them. Not at all. They participate in my writing, and I participate in the marketing. But we have our areas of expertise, and we mostly stick to them.
Do you have an editor outside of yourself?
That's part of what our investor / publisher brings to the party. So the publisher will bring all those resources. You have to have an editor. A person who is his own editor is like the man who is his own surgeon. Not a good plan.
That reminds me of the scene from Wolverine when he's got that thing in his body and he's got to take it out and he's trying to stick the knife in and he goes, wait, but I'm going to die during this, so I can't do it. So he had to have somebody else finally do the last incision to take it out.
Yeah. That last incision, I, as a writer, I identify with that.
So the editor is like that last incision, the one that keeps it all together and makes sure that you come off the table alive.
All the cliches you've heard, too, are absolutely true. Hemingway, you have to murder your darlings or whatever it was. It's true that you have writing on the page that you just think is brilliant. It's like, oh, this is like the best passage, and that has to go. It's like, no, that's no good. It happened.
I couldn't have written my book without my amazing editor, Jocelyn Godfrey, and Linda Sterling, who also helped edit as well. And I quote you in my book, What Would a Wise Woman Do? But you know that because you've kindly read my book.
Certainly did.
We're going to come back and go into our last commercial break, and then in our last segment. I can't believe the show is almost over already. And I'm going to ask you this question when we come back, John. So you're ready? I'm going to give you a little... No, I'm not going to give you any advance warning of this question I'm about to ask you.
Oh, good. Life on the edge. I love it.
We'll be right back with more from the amazing John David Mann. All right, John, are you ready for the question?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word. Wow. I just said wow, didn't I? I've never been asked that question.
Yay! I love it when I ask you stuff nobody else asks you.
I mean, last week somebody asked me my favorite quote, as you know, because I blogged about it. I guess my favorite word, I use the word extraordinary a lot, so I must like it. But there are other words I like more.
Yeah.
Supercilious, magnificent, platypus. I guess my favorite word is yes.
Oh, why?
Because that is what I've found really works. And this may sound corny, but sometimes corny is corny because it's real. There's two ways to approach a day, a situation, a blank page, a challenge, a job, an opportunity, a task, a problem. One is no and one is yes. My mom, who was a school teacher, used to say that she would hand out a test paper, and she always was amused by the kids who would look at the back of the paper turned upside down and say, "I don't get it," before they even looked at the paper. Or they would look at the paper and find the one question they didn't understand and say, "I don't get it," instead of 19 questions they did understand, and just start to work on those. I approach my life with an attitude of yes, which is that I fundamentally have faith that this is going to work for the best of all involved. And I have to have that attitude going into writing, or else it seems impossible, and if it seems impossible, then I can't do it. So I guess my favorite word would be yes. Wait, see.
I like that, but I also liked platypus.
And supercilious and magnificent. Yeah, so many great words.
Yeah, but what's fascinating about yes being your favorite word is it's everything I know about you. It's not just a word, but it's who you are. I never thought of it before until you told me what your favorite word is. But it suits you. It's who you are as a human being on the planet. It's how you live.
Well, Laura, I never thought about it until you asked me the question. My God, woman, thank you. What would a wise woman ask?
It's funny because I was thinking, what's my favorite word? And I've always said, when somebody asked me that before, I'd say quag. Because quag. It's a type of clam, and it's a town on Long Island in New York.
Yeah.
Just because every time I see the sign when I was going out to Long Island, out to wherever I was going, it made me smile and it made me laugh. And just saying the word.
Sometimes pronounced quahog.
Yeah, quahog. But I always pronounced it as quag.
Right.
But as you were saying the word yes, the word that popped into my mind, the true word for me is joy.
That's fantastic. C.S. Lewis wrote this book called Surprised by Joy. And oddly enough, it was years later that this woman named Joy Adamson came into his life, whom he ultimately married. So talk about a fulfilling prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Goosebumps all over me when you just said that. All right. What's next for you? You've got this book out, well, 2 books in the last month.
Yep.
I happen to know there's another book coming up, but I'll let you share that. What's next?
Well, I've got Bob Berg and I have a new Go Giver book coming out next year. It's already written. Brandon and I are working on a book right now also, which will be coming out next year, which is going to be called Mastering Fear. We're going to have fun talking about that. But I think you're probably hinting at this. I have a book coming out this fall called The Recipe. And it's a little different for me. It's a book that I co-wrote with an award-winning chef. And it's a story of love and tragedy and overcoming. And fundamentally, it's about learning lessons of greatness, lessons of life in a cramped diner kitchen. So it's food and personal growth is putting my great loves on the same page.
And I'm going to get to interview you again over that book.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that book's been, 8 years in the making or something like that?
Yes. 8 years in the making. It's been a slow roast, and we're really, really excited. This is going to be, as you know, a different one because we're publishing this one ourselves. Whole new ballgame for me.
And you've self-published some books before, but...
I've self-published a few books, but they were like little labors of love that I never really had much intention to get out broadly. So I didn't really market them, didn't promote them, had no serious expectations for them in terms of numbers. They weren't even business launches. They were, something I wanted to have available for people who wanted it. This is different. This is a real book. This is a book that I mean to be a successful book. And that I've never done. I've never tried to take a book to the marketplace to compete with, other books that are real books, and done it all myself. That's going to be a whole new experience.
And if somebody wants to get involved to help with the launch, how do they go about doing that?
We have this thing called the launch team, advanced readers who are reading a review copy of the book with errors and typos and all before it comes out and helping us to launch the book. And you can see details of that on my website, johndavidmann.com, if you go to the book page and look for The Recipe.
So people can still join the launch team and get involved?
The launch team is open till the end of August. And to join that, you simply email me with your email address and the word launch. And you can email me through my website. And from now through the end of August, at that point, we've got to cut it off because we have to cut it off at some point.
All right. So if you don't get involved on the launch team for the next book, The Recipe, that doesn't mean you still can't support the launch. So we'll be talking about that. But this current book, John, Total Focus, How to Make Better Decisions Under Pressure, where can people get that book?
That book is everywhere. Amazon, BN, Kobo, iTunes, iBooks, you name it. It's at the bookstores. Today is the launch day, so it's actually hitting the shelves for the first time, and Brandon is out in a book tour, and he's on media in New York, and you don't have to look far, but it is certainly on Amazon as well.
I received an advance copy of the book well before it came out, so I could prep for these interviews, and I bought a copy of the book today because it's something that everybody, I just wanted to support you guys so much, and then I can put a review up and say Amazon verified purchaser.
Oh, Laura, you are a true champion. You know what that does for me?
What?
It gives me joy. It gives me joy.
Ah, thank you so much. So last thought you want to share with my listeners?
The last thought I want to share is the most successful people have gone through some of the thorniest, most difficult, and most unexpected murky depths. It was my favorite part of this book, actually. We get to chronicle Brandon's struggle even halfway through his business. So look beneath the cover of every book of success and look to the struggle, and that's where I think the greatest lessons are.
Yeah, on your blog, you've shared some of your own personal struggles, and and Brandon shares it in each of these books, including how he had so much hate against him when he started stepping out, doing the Red Circle and Amongst Heroes, and still, and it's just really sad. Mark Harmon's advice to him was so beautiful, though, and people will have to listen to last week's episode to hear about that advice.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful stuff.
So beautiful. So, John, you've written so many books. You've changed so many people's lives, including myself. And just as a book geek, I want to thank you for your words and how you put them together. Because my life's changed since I met you. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to thank somebody in person for changing the way they think.
Well, I appreciate that immensely. Thank you, Laura. And, problems come and go, but words endure. So, yay.
I love that. Words endure. That's a perfect way to end the show today. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for being my host.
Awesome. All right. So everybody, remember, the right questions truly can change your life. So think about, what are you asking yourself today? Have a great day, everyone, and go out and buy Total Focus, How to Make Better Decisions Under Pressure. See you soon.
You've been listening to It's All About the Questions, starring Laura Stewart. Connect with Laura at it'sallaboutthequestions.com and download a free workbook that will help you ask better questions starting today.